Sometimes it feels like one video may not be enough, and that's kind of how I feel this morning. Many of you know that YouTube has a 10-minute limit on these things, so we'll see. Maybe I'll do two. Who knows? Because it has been a little while since we've done this. April 11th, I guess, looking at the site, and I guess a lot has happened, and or maybe a little has happened, depending upon how you look at things. So a few thoughts this morning. And, it's interesting. Again, I guess we'll start with it hasn't been quite a year since we started this diary, blog, journal, whatever you want to call it. I prefer the term diary because that's really what it is for me personally. But the YouTube count, you can tell based on the last one that we did is now over 1,000 per video, or at least we topped 1,000. 1,074 by my count this morning, and you got to subtract one from that because I do a test. So, and I figure another 50 million, 31,900 and change will be caught up to Susan Boyle. So look out, Susan. Obviously, I'm having some fun with this, but I'm doing so for one reason, because again, as interest is such that people find their way to the site, it certainly provides interesting thoughts at my end in terms of where we've gone or where we've come, and where we might go with this. But I guess I wanted to address a couple of requests that I've had recently to resurrect some of the old DVDs and teach. And I talked to a gentleman the other day about he was interested in watching me trade live, and it reminds me of a few years ago, several years ago, when I guess because of some decent level of performance, I was asked to write, and I did the magazines, and I did the chat rooms, and that sort of thing, and even a daily column for a major site. And again, a few years ago, as I mentioned to Linda's team the other day, I decided to go back to trading. I enjoy it. And in terms of the recent requests that have come in terms of doing a book, certainly I am humbled and appreciate the comments. I think to even be mentioned in the same paragraph as Lefebvre's book and Street Smarts and some of the other ones is certainly an honor, if you will. But I was certainly asked to do that a few years ago, and last year I came up with the idea that maybe this would be better in terms of sharing daily thoughts, sharing one person's journey. And I think one of the challenges in putting out anything in terms of a book or an article or something that is often outdated the moment the ink is dry, and keeping in mind it's just a snapshot because of publication deadlines and that kind of thing. That an ongoing dialogue is might be more beneficial. I don't know. Again, I keep referring to this site, this endeavor, as my diary, because that's really what it is. I don't really care what other people think about it. I don't care if they like how I trade or if they like what I say necessarily. It certainly provides me an opportunity to vent and to keep myself motivated and focused. And to that extent, I guess we'll certainly keep doing it. But again, back to the point about books and articles. I think you've got to be careful with that to some extent. As you have to be careful when you're reading any of the stuff on this site. I get two magazines, futures magazines, and I won't mention names, but I came across an article in a recent one here that I just got in the mail the other day that was written by a fairly prominent individual that I'm sure has a great level of respect in the industry. But I just want to read this to you. It says as the volatility index VIX rose to historic levels last fall, he wisely advised students to stay out of the market entirely. And then later on, he suggested they get back in, but with extremely small amounts. He says later on he wanted to stress small and just dabble when they got back in. I guess that's a great example of there's no right or wrong in this business, and there's no one way to approach this. An example is if I had followed that strategy, I would have literally foregone about $750,000, and that's not an exaggeration for what happened last fall. I happen to trade fairly well in volatile markets. I can feel the emotion of traders. I fade emotion to a large extent. That's where I provide a lot of my home run income. Recognizing that that's not always going to be there, recognizing that that may be there, once a month or once a week or once a year, in terms of maybe 1 month out of the year, or in the case of 2008, that whole fall sequence may very well be once in a lifetime. Certainly in terms of market volatility, we'd never seen anything like that. And I get that, and I got that at the time, which is why I've said, ad infinitum, that you have to press it when it's there, for however you describe your fertile environment, and recognize that it's not always going to be the case. When I had 3 losing days out of the first 3 months, I kept saying it's not always going to be like that. And this month it came back down to earth a little bit, close to 75-80% maybe for year to date. So I guess my point being that there is no right or wrong way to do this. You've got to be profitable at the end of the time period that you're focused on, and your gains and revenues have to exceed losses and costs. But aside from that, there's just no one way to do it. So I guess I have an issue when people come out and say, well, this is it. This is how you should do it, and follow me, because in this case, it would, for my personality and for what I do well, it would have been absolutely the worst thing that I could have done. So anyway, that's that. And again, back to the teaching. I've learned a lesson. I've learned a lot of lessons over the recent years. But one of the lessons I learned is and I guess it gets a little bit back to what I just mentioned as well, in terms of teaching, and again, as the exposure to this site has continued to grow, I want to be careful, and I know I always point to the FAQ, and I continue to do that. Please, if you're new to this, read that, because I'm not going to be here ever talking about a single way to trade, or recommend people trade, or anything along those lines. This is a very difficult business. It's the minority that are successful. It's a tiny minority in terms of the large sample size. And it's a zero-sum game where the majority of losing traders shift their capital to the tiny minority of winning traders, and those that win do very, very well. But again, to the extent that it helps in battling that kind of thing, great. I guess the point I'm trying to make is I've also seen other non-profit club type activities do something along the lines that we're doing here, in terms of not paying or charging for courses and that sort of thing. And there's one, I won't mention the name, but there's a particular club that went from that to totally commercial, and it's really sick, in my view. And again, that's not to say that there's not a good way to teach or that kind of thing. I've always struggled. I've always looked for different ways to do it, in terms of maybe filming trading live for a number of days would work well, or something similar to that. But again, I don't want this to be about Don Miller. This is my diary. This is my journal, and while I appreciate and honored by some of the recommendations that I write a book and go back to teaching, and even to be mentioned in the same paragraph as the Edwin Lefebvre book and Street Smarts and some of those other ones is certainly again an honor. But I'm having fun with what I'm doing here, and again, there's just I think there's a lot that we can babble about here that helps, but in the long run, we're all our own individuals, and there's all our different ways to trade, and I think I am going to run a second video here because I'm almost out of time, and maybe we'll expand a little bit more on that in a few minutes here. But anyway, that kind of sets the stage a little bit. It's a great day. I'm a little bit froggy voiced this morning because I was up late playing cards last night, and I'm allergic to cats, deathly allergic to cats, and the guy had 2 cats in his house. So anyway, well, I'm going to continue this on the next video. We'll do something different this weekend, and we'll see where that goes. So we'll catch you around the corner here.